We're doing something a little different today. So for the first time ever, this is episode 8, we have a special guest with us. First, obviously, I'm going to introduce Lou. Lou, what's up?
How's it going, man? Happy New Year's, guys. It's been a pleasure. Can't wait to get another year of some good old hoops talk this year, man.
Yeah, and like I said, we have a special guest for the first time ever. Watch the intro. Ladies and gentlemen, from Toronto, Ontario, I don't know. Don't be offended by that. Canada. Our Canadian friend, you might have seen her on Yahoo. Right now, you can see her on Prose Claws. You might have seen her making puns on Twitter. You might have seen her praising basically the ground Kyle Lowry walks on, which, seeing how he's been playing this year, as Heat fans, we get it now. Ladies and gentlemen, Imman Adan. Imman, how you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me. I feel honored. First guest ever.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 8 of Playoff Foul. I'm Kenny Spence. Glad to have y'all back. Glad to be back. I introduced who's with me already, but once again, I got Lou, I got Imman with me, and we're going to get right into it. There was a big trade over the weekend. Basically, OG Anunoby is a Knick now. Barrett and Immanuel Quickley are Raptors now. There was also Malachi Flynn, who I got questions about, and Prose Achiuwa, who I honestly have nothing on.
Who we have answers about. Anyways.
Not to be mean, but hey, good luck out there. I hope he's like, hey, it is what it is. But that being said, before I even ask who's with me, just generally speaking, because there's always takes on trades. I think me personally, I understand it. It is sports. There's wins and losses. That's what it's all based on. But I don't think that's always the right way to read trades. And I think in this one, because of the circumstances, I think both teams got better in a sense. So I feel like with the Raptors, they needed some ball handling. Even though, look, Scotty Barnes, we'll get into Scotty Barnes later on. But they needed some more ball handling, and the Knicks needed a little less ball handling. And they needed more of an identity, and they're missing Mitchell Robinson. And so I think, before I even get too deep into that, I just want to just say that a lot of times with trades, it's less about who's the better player or worse player and who won or lost. And it's about what makes the marriage between front office and head coach work, which makes the team work. And with that being said, that's why I believe both teams got better. But before I get deeper into that, I'm going to ask the people who are with me what they think about these things. I'm going to go with Lou first, because I'm sure Imman has a lot more to say.
Yeah, to me, it was just, first of all, it's good to always break the seal in trade season. I feel like transaction talk is something that takes over Twitter. So this being the first one and being in a holiday, it got like even more reactions, I felt like, than a typical trade would. And then you see the names. Headline name is obviously OG Anunoby heading out. A lot of talk has been made about what he was going to garner in terms of value. Did they get enough? The word fleece gets thrown around. I hate that word, but it's just interesting to see what the original talks were. Also, when this first, I feel like Anunoby's name's been around the trade market now for a couple years, honestly. So the value, just the way contracts work, it's not as high as it used to be, because he used to have 3 years under control. I believe he's a free agent after this year. So considering all those things, I do think it's a good trade for both sides. Specifically, Toronto, I mean, she's going to speak on it better than I am, but I don't know if they're going to pay him. I don't know what they're going to do. It's like a tricky situation with them and him. So now they get somebody who's a new face. The Canada talk to me is overridden. It doesn't matter. I think look, man, as Heat fans, we appreciated Udonis Haslem for what he did off the court, but on the court, it was what it was at the last couple ends of his years. It is what it is. You get people because they can play basketball. You shouldn't really care where they're from, is my point. But them getting him and Quickley, which I feel like kind of adds something to the guard room where I feel like they've been seeking for a minute now, especially once Lowry left. He provided like kind of a hold there. I know Van Vliet was able to take some of that over, but now he's gone too. So, insert Schroeder in there. They drafted Malachi Flynn, who kind of really hasn't panned out. They traded for Gary Trent Jr. It's like, it feels like they're trying to like hit at this hole, and they've been missing a couple of times. I think, not not every time, but I do think they've done well without it. It's just getting somebody of his caliber with his rim present, like penetration, ability to drive, and just make shots, man. This team needs people who can make shots. He can make shots. So I thought it was a fantastic trade for both sides. I was super into it. And I mean, the Knicks, oh shit, man, they got better. If anybody saw that Minnesota game, if anybody if you've ever watched OG Anunoby play defense, like point blank period, like he is one of the best, if not the best perimeter defender there is in basketball. You can tell he can guard basically 1 through 4, some small ball 5s. Like it was a presence having him out there. And it was their first game, and they beat the Minnesota Timberwolves, which were the second best team in basketball at the time. So there's not really much to be said.
So Imman, a little different because this obviously has a much bigger impact on you. Where were you when you got the news? Because like Lou said, OG has been in trade rumors for a while now.
Yeah.
And from what I've seen, I don't know why he's so polarizing as far as the Toronto fans, but it is what it is. We got our own players that way. I don't want to get into that yet again. But where were you when you got the news?
It's so funny because I was busy with like my niece and doing a whole bunch of stuff that day, and I got like a few texts and I got a few tweets saying, "What are your thoughts on the trade?" And no one mentions what trade. Everyone assumes you know what they're talking about. And so I like put that away, went to go pick up my niece, and my brother-in-law was like, "What'd you think of the trade?" And I'm like, what trade happened here? And then they're like, "Oh yeah, OG Anunoby for first it was I heard OG for RJ Barrett and Quickley." And I was like, "Quickley is in the deal?" Because it's so funny. The night before, I was talking to my friend and we were just thinking through trades. And I'm like, the Knicks, like the CAA connection is there, right? Like for those of you guys who don't know, OG Anunoby changed agencies last year. He went from Clutch to CAA. And a few months later, he's a Knick. Who would have thunk? But his agent is the son of Leon Rose. So there is that connection there. So the Knicks seemed like, okay, let's think through. And my takeaway was, I just want it to have Quickley. Like if it has Quickley in the deal, I'm good. I thought maybe it would have to be like Evan Fournier to make money work or anything like that. The Knicks are, of course, holding on to that so that they can make trades in the future, which I think makes the most sense for them. So that's how I found out. I was just kept hearing, what are your thoughts on the trade? And I'm like, what trade is everybody talking about? But I assumed it was OG Anunoby. I thought, and admittedly, kind of glad it was OG Anunoby because I thought that that's a move that needed to be made. Whereas like Pascal Siakam, I probably would still be recovering from it a little bit.
OG. Well, actually, first, let me just say, the word underrated gets overused, and so I don't like it. But I feel like when I first saw the news of it and the way people were like, well, the Knicks got fleeced or whatever it is, I'm like, I don't know if y'all are already familiar with OG Anunoby because what he's going to bring to the Knicks, and like I said in the beginning, this is the front office head coach marriage working as far as making the team work with these trades. You have Tom Thibodeau, who is a defensive-minded coach, always has been. If you don't defend for him, you're just not going to succeed. And that team in general, they needed less ball handling. I felt, and me and Lou talked about on an earlier episode, RJ Barrett wasn't getting a ton of opportunity there because you have Jalen Brunson and you have Julius Randle has been incredible this year. And so, yeah, you could play RJ with the bench unit, but he's kind of figuring stuff out, whereas now you can just replace him with someone who doesn't need the ball at all. And some sentences don't even sound real when you say them. And so I'm going to get to that in a second. But the thing that's most important with this OG Anunoby thing, this goes back to the head coach thing, Jalen Brunson, we know wants to get to the middle, right? Yeah. And we know Julius Randle, you can find him in the pinch post or somewhere nearby every time. This is what doesn't sound real. So in the past 3 years, OG Anunoby is shooting his lowest percentage in corner threes, and that percentage is 44%.
Yeah.
So you put him out there with them, and I was watching him, catching up with the Knicks versus Wolves game just before, and just seeing him obviously knock those down. but then being reminded of all the other stuff he does off the ball, cutting at the right time, making all the correct reads at the right time, every time, being able to finish off those cuts. And that's just how he helps on offense.
Yeah.
Like Lou said, this is one, if you said he's the best defender in the league, I'd probably have my bias and say Bam Adebayo, but I wouldn't have much of a real argument.
My bias
I wouldn't have much of a real argument.
And I'll even take it a step further. Lou said 1 through 4. He's been 1 through 5 for the Raptors, right?
Yeah.
The Raptors didn't have a center until they traded for Jakob Poeltl, who's out there guarding Karl Anthony Towns, who I guess plays for. Technically, Rudy Gobert's there, but who's out there guarding Nikola Jokic? He was the best guy to guard Jokic for the Raptors. Who's out there guarding Embiid? He will, on any given night, go up and guard the other team's best player, whether it's Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker. Like, it can be any type of player. We're talking guard, wing, 7-footer, 6-footer. It does not matter. The Raptors throw him out on that guy. He is, he can hang with guys on the perimeter, but he's also strong enough to bang with bodies down low. Like, he is, and granted, he shouldn't be your rim protector. He shouldn't be your 5. That's why the Raptors needed to give up a first-round pick to get Jakob Poeltl. But for the Knicks, I think he's so underrated. To your point, when people say the Knicks got fleeced, I get it because I'm a huge IQ fan, but the Knicks need someone like that, especially because they want to take that next step in the Eastern Conference. Okay, well, then you're going to go up against Jimmy Butler. You're going to go up against Jason Tatum. You're going to go up against Giannis Antetokounmpo and like all of these guys. Who is going to be that defender for you? Because most of your guys are too small. And I'm sorry, a team that built with Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson is going to need some defense. And also to your point there, Kenny, they're going to need some people who are not going to need the ball in their hands because OG Anunoby is the play finisher in this league. Like he does not need the ball. I mean, he wants it, and we keep hearing these reports and these rumors year in and year out that he wants the ball in his hands. But I'm going to be honest, I think that comes when he's on a bad team. And it's just like, where are we going? And I'm not getting these reps on a good team, as we've seen with the Raptors. Those reports were not coming out. Granted, he wasn't with Clutch when that thing was happening. The reports only started to come out when he was with Clutch for that short time. But to me, he was the premier play finisher because he's such an elite catch and shoot guy from the corner, because he's such an elite finisher, because he's such an elite cutter. He can just do things that just finishes plays. And I think that's what the Knicks need, because they just have too many people, to your point, that are on ball, and they don't have enough defense. And he kind of fulfills that exact need for them, which is why the price was so high.
And also what he does, because me and Lou also said in the previous episode, the Knicks were kind of looking for an identity. Yeah. And we know what Tibbs' identity is, but he didn't necessarily have the personnel fully. And Jalen Brunson's still not a great defender. Julius Randle can be a good defender when he wants to be, but you're adding Julius Randle to when Mitchell Robinson gets back. If OG resigns, you're adding him to that. You have Dante DiVincenzo there. You have Quentin Grimes. You have Deuce McBride is going to get some more minutes now.
Achiuwa, respect him.
Josh Hart.
Yeah, Josh Hart definitely. So now they get to be more of a Tibbs type team and get to really make things ugly for teams. And like you mentioned, the Eastern Conference is full of offensively talented wings that will push their teams to wins with scoring. And so now you have somebody to really disrupt that. And the Raptors hadn't been a contender for a couple of years for whatever reason. So now OG gets to really shine in not only, and I don't care about the market stuff personally, but it will be good too. And I want to know your thoughts on this also, Imman, to kind of get to see OG get the credit he deserves in a sense with a team like the Knicks.
I love it for him. I'm really happy for him because I think he's been one of the more underrated players in basketball for a long time, because he's not going to wow you with the stat sheet, because he's like this year it's dropped down, but he's been around 18 points a game the last couple of years. He led the league in steals last year, but he's not going to make a ton of highlight reels that you're sort of thinking of, because he's not going to have the ball in his hands and do a ton of things. He might get a dunk here and there, but he's not the sort of wow you type of star. He just does everything else that a team needs really, really well. And I'm happy that he's going to get the credit that he deserves for that, and the spotlight that he deserves for that, because he wasn't even really a part of the Raptors championship run. So when everyone was tuning in for those games, unfortunately, he wasn't a part of the playoffs in that run. He was on the team, but he was out because appendicitis. Yeah, so he didn't even get to really truly experience that. So I'm just happy he gets to be on the big stage here.
So the Toronto Raptors now, and once again, this marriage between front office and head coach. So the Raptors I almost said y'all. The Raptors have a rookie head coach, and so there's usually not much to gauge on that. But just looking at his history with like being an assistant, so he had Russell Westbrook in OKC, he had Chris Paul in Phoenix, and he had Ja Morant in Memphis before he got to Toronto. And so you can look at that, and you can understand, and Devin Booker also. And so you can look at that, and you can look at and you can kind of understand. All right, Dennis Schroeder's not going to really cut it for what they're going to try to do. They're not going to fire a rookie coach, obviously. So they're going to try to make it work first. So they're going to get him somebody. And so they bring in Immanuel Quickley. I'm excited for him because I feel like he has a next level to take with some opportunity, but I also have some questions, but I'll go to y'all first on him.
So I think one of the intriguing things about Quickley, I mean, obviously, offensively, we know what he's capable of. Mm-hmm. I do think defensively, he is a pesky point of attack defender, and he's really good at screen navigation. So that's going to be two things because, it's funny because when I think of the Raptors and you see all these like power wings that they have, Barnes and Siakam, and when they had OG, like their defense felt like it should be better. Mm-hmm. At certain moments. They're 17th and currently in defensive rating. So I feel like some of that was point of attack stuff. Obviously, other things, people, certain rim protection, certain backups who were in the trade. But he's going to help certain aspects of that. Just their ability to harass the ball because they do have length behind him. So if he can just navigate these screens and like really let Pirtle sit in a drop for most of the game. She just talked about how good of a rim protector he is. It's going to make just the defense a whole lot better. So that aspect is super intriguing. But what I really want to see offensively is how much of a jump can he take playmaking? Because I think that's realistically what they want to push on him. And I think that's what they should push on him. Shout out to Scotty Barnes, who's been sensational this year.
Shout out to West Palm Beach, South Florida native. There
you go. And Siakam has been very, very good as well. Passing the ball. They're very good playmakers for their size. But it's different when it comes from a point guard, isn't it? Like that's kind of how it feels like, realistically. So it's just nice to have that. A guy who can be a 3-level scorer for this team, who can floor space and play off ball because he has done it. But how much of this offensive repertoire can he expand in terms of getting others involved and just just essentially being like a glue guy, but at the point of attack. Like you want to make this, I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. We'll ask Imman, but it feels like they're heading towards a Scotty and IQ. Like this is what they're going now. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you agree. I don't know if I'm completely wrong, but like it feels like with the OG move having to be made, and now maybe Siakam, I don't know what's going to happen there. God knows what's going to happen there, but it feels like they're pushing a certain thing, and I do think he is a correct piece to for this coach to build around the rookie head coach and just really implement himself because the team last year Scotty Barnes wasn't getting this usage rate. So it's been a flip between obviously I'm not saying he was ready or he wasn't, but he's gotten a lot better, which has helped. But it's been a flip amongst like the tiers. Like it was Siakam was pretty clear ahead of everybody last year, and now this year it's like they're mismatching, but really Scotty Barnes kind of taking more of the lead. So I'm just curious to see what direction as a franchise Toronto's deciding to go and how big are they willing to make RJ Barrett or Quickley a part of it.
Yeah. I think you guys both hit on a lot of things. I think with Quickley, to be honest, in terms of the playmaking that's being added, one of the biggest things that he brings in addition to that playmaking or in conjunction with that playmaking is the floor spacing, is that pull-up shooting, which is something the Raptors lacked entirely. And so last season, they should have been much better than they were, but it turns out you need a center in basketball. You can't just play 4 power forwards and a point guard. You needed a center, and it took them too late to make that move. And when they finally made that trade, and I know a lot of people still really hate it, but when they finally made that trade, their starting 5 was legitimate. They had the top 5. They had a top 5 net rating in the league with that starting 5 post trade deadline. They were actually playing really well. Their bench was abysmal. It was one of the worst in the league, if not the worst or something. It was terrible. We'll get into part of why this trade is good. But because someone that you guys don't like is a big part of the bench and probably a big part of the reason why that bench was not so great. But so it started to make sense, and you started to see, okay, this is what the Raptors team is going to try to look like. They're going to be more traditional, not just, have a more balanced roster. But then you lose Fred VanVleet in the offseason, and then they head into this year without a point guard. And now Raptor fans are very mad at Jakob Poeltl. It's like, what is he doing here? And part of that is he lost his pick and roll partner. So the Raptors offense right now, I think, is ranked 23rd in the league. And a large reason for that is because they just can't get easy points. And last year, post-trade deadline, their bread and butter was that pick and roll between Fred VanVleet and Jakob Poeltl. And the problem with Dennis Schroeder running that is Dennis isn't a pull-up shooter. You can't just have people go under on everything. The Raptors already lack a ton of spacing, and so it's not been great. And bringing in a guy like IQ, who has that pull-up shooting, who has that floor spacing, that just changes this entire Raptors look. That just changes everything. And the fact that Scottie Barnes, one of the biggest jumps, I don't know if you guys have been seeing this stat that's been all over Twitter, but the biggest jump in Scottie Barnes' season this year is three-point shooting. He's had the biggest leap in terms of both, I think, efficiency and frequency for three-point shooting. So he's taken more this year than any other player, or the jump between last year and this year is larger than any other player. And the efficiency between last year and this year for that jump has been larger than any other player. He's been phenomenal from deep, and that's been a huge part of the change of his game. And so having your two lead ball handlers be able to do that, I think really changes this look for the Raptors team, who, yes, the ball's in Scottie Barnes' hands more, but it seems like they've been a little hesitant to just make him the starter. It just happened 2 games ago where they had him as a starting point guard and benched Dennis Schroeder. Now they've got IQ, they've got Scottie, and you've got 2 people who can handle and pull up. And I think it just changes this look of the Raptors team. So I think definitely IQ is a huge part of this Raptors future. I think part of the reason why you trade for him as early as they did, because people are like, well, why didn't you wait until the deadline or da-da-da-da-da? Or in the offseason, is the Raptors really wanted to see what this 2-person, lead ball handler type of look would look like, and you get some additional time to do that, and you get some time to see what RJ Barrett looks like with all of this, and potentially Siakam. I think he's probably the next trade piece, but nothing's really happened yet with him, so it's interesting to see how all of that sort of works together.
Yeah, and so also RJ Barrett, I feel like he's the biggest name in that trade because he's from right there in Mississauga. He was like a high school phenom, and we'll get into that a little later, but obviously he's probably the biggest name in this trade because of all those reasons. But I feel like with him personally, and I'll get to y'all next, but for me, I feel like you can't really gauge him too much because sometimes players and coaches just don't necessarily mix. And I feel like, yeah, you can talk about him not necessarily being efficient, but, and this is also this is where Nick Nurse not being in Toronto anymore is a good thing. I feel like under a coach like Tom Thibodeau, who's going to overplay his players, you can't really hold those players' efficiency against them. And so I'm excited to see what RJ Barrett looks like in Toronto with a little, not less responsibility, but a little less minutes, being able to rest and having some legs under him. Maybe just those positions make up a little bit. And so I'm curious to see how he's going to look there. But I'm also going to go to Lou first and then Imman.
Yeah, so one of the biggest concerns with RJ is his finishing in traffic. He hasn't been a good finisher on his drives. So I'm curious to see how much of that part of his game is going to improve, as well as we're talking about Quickley getting some on-ball reps, and rightfully so. But I think Barrett is going to get some of these on-ball reps too, considering you said some of the lack of bench play that they've had over the couple of years. It might not be all the time. It might not be if Siakam ever gets moved until he gets moved, I guess. But I do expect them to explore that a little bit more as well, because like you said, Kenny, when he was coming out of high school, he was ranked over Zion. Mm-hmm. He was the highest ranked prospect. Whether that they were right or wrong, that's obviously, not my fault. But no, he was when he was coming out, everybody they really liked him. He was a good build for a 2/3. Who can in theory guard some 2 to 4, and in theory he can play make. It's just all these in theories which he hasn't really been able to develop, because it felt like when he was finally starting to do that, it was like, we got Jalen Brunson and he does that better than anybody we have on the team. So your duties are going to him, your reps are going to Jalen Brunson, and rightfully so. I'm curious if they give him some leeway and some responsibility. I don't know how much his shooting is going to, because he hasn't been bad this year. I don't know how real it is outside of the corner. I don't know how much he can do in terms of spacing for them. So it's going to be interesting. But like you said, if the pull-up shooting is there, that having one, if Immanuel Quickley can shoot as good as he can off the pull-up, because we saw it specifically against the Heat game. He annihilated us in the fourth quarter with pull-up threes. And if he has the power to do that, then it doesn't matter the spacing around him. So Barrett can just make it work. And he is a good slasher in terms of like knowing where to be without the ball and stuff like that. So he is a high IQ player. I'm just curious to see how much of an offensive leap his game takes and how much they're willing to let him explore that, because I believe he just signed an extension last year. So he has some money on the table. So
yeah, he'll have some money. Yeah, a lot. But that's rising, so it'll be fine. I think with a large part of this is what happens with Pascal Siakam. Because as it stands right now, if you look at it, and obviously this can change, but he should be your fourth guy on option. He should be your fourth option on offense, I should say, because you've got IQ and Scotty and Pascal all ahead of him, which means he's not going to be able to truly play the OG role as the sort of finisher you want the ball in his. I mean, the ball's probably going to be in his hands some more, but because he's not going to be the same corner shooter that OG was, which has been so integral and important to the Raptors. I think he's only shooting like 33% from the corners or something like that. Might be a little bit higher, might be whatever it is. It's not good. At 38% maybe from the corners. It might be good from the corners, but everywhere else is like 33. But I can't remember. I was on Cleaning the Glass yesterday. But you're going to need more from him in that sort of like, can you get to the line, to your point? Like, can you finish inside? Because he is a better. OG's improved as a finisher, but I think RJ, just because he's got that sort of bully and just go straight. And we saw it in game one. He turned it over quite a bit, but RJ has that. That OG didn't. And so they have some strengths where the other one has weaknesses, but I don't think he'll be as integral to this Raptors team right now, just because he is the fourth option on offense. And you have those three other guys that are in the pecking order ahead of him. And that could jump. Like, hey, if he comes in and looks different because it's a change of scenery or anything like that, that completely changes. I didn't know that he was ranked ahead of Zion. That is news to me because I don't pay attention to anything until you get to the NBA. Then I'm introduced to you as a player. But so that's actually wild to me. But I think that with RJ, he's not the third overall pick for the Raptors. He's not the person that they've staked their future on. They didn't use anything like. IQ seems to be the bigger deal currently in terms of the trade back. And so the expectations on him are not going to be as high. Now he is, Mississauga native. He is, a hometown kid. And so there's still that there, but I don't know that the pressure to be whatever the Knicks wanted or had hopes or aspirations for him to become exists in Toronto as much, which hopefully is less pressure for the kid. He's still only 23 years old. But also, and this is something that Raptor fans got mad at me for this morning, and I was reading my mentions, and I was like, oh, okay, people don't like this. I was sort of bandying the idea that, like, hey, if RJ it can't shoot the three well, because he's had like maybe one season in his 3-year career where he shot the three ball pretty well, or 4-year career. So I'm like, if he can't shoot the three ball well, can you just start Gary Trent Jr.? If the Raptors are really lacking spacing because they start Pascal Siakam and Jakob Poeltl, who both can't shoot, can you just bring in Gary instead of having 3 non-shooters in your starting lineup? And that way you only have Pascal and Jakob as your 2 non-shooters. And then you have Dennis and RJ sort of running bench lineups for you. How does that work? I don't hate the idea. I don't know if the Raptors are going to do it because, as Oren pointed out, there's politics involved and he was a part of a big deal and he's, the third overall pick and all that other stuff. But I don't know how much that sits, especially if there is that option there. Darko has a lot of options in front of him, and he's already changed the starting lineup once. So, I have no reason to believe that he won't do that if things aren't working for him in the future as well. So the Raptors have some avenues, but a large part of it just falls on what do they do with Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, and so I hadn't even thought about that. That is a pretty good idea because under Darko, under Nick Nurse, first of all, I feel like the Raptors prioritized defensive versatility. Yeah. And towards the end, the offensive versatility just kind of got worse and worse to the point where there was none.
Yeah.
I feel like now with this move, you both mentioned Immanuel Quickley's pull-up shooting. Also, I'm sure you've watched enough, but for any Raptor fan tuning in, don't expect Immanuel Quickley to ever miss a floater like in his life. It doesn't happen. I can't explain it. I don't know. So he has that also. RJ Barrett as well. He brings some stuff offensively. Like I said, you can't really gauge his stuff under just having no legs with Tom Thibodeau. You can't really gauge the efficiency. But I do feel like now they have a little more options than they did before on offense. And like I said, I feel like both teams got better because of that. Obviously, you're going to miss OG with the corner shooting and the defense, but now with Immanuel Quickley, my other question with him also now is, and it's a little ironic with the point I've made with RJ, he wasn't getting nearly enough minutes in New York, and he was far ahead as best net rating on the team, whatever it is, and he was just, I think he had one game this season in New York where he played more than 30 minutes. Yeah. And he was a guy who brought a lot of energy to the game. And so I don't know how much of him expending that energy for a longer amount of time is going to really help him or hurt him, but I am excited to see it no matter what. And so I feel like that with the team is just good. But overall, it's going to help the team a whole bunch. But I am curious about that because Gary Trent Jr. is very polarizing in general. That type of player is polarizing in general. So I am curious more of how you see that working with him in the starting lineup. Because he kind of
Gary in the starting lineup?
Yeah, because he kind of loses his mind sometimes on offense. I'm going to be honest. Like,
yeah.
And so I understand.
I love Gary Trent Jr.
I think that a player like that loses their mind on offense a little bit when they're tasked with doing a lot.
Yeah.
To me, the best version of Gary has always been when he's been with the starters because he, again, just needs to be a play finisher. I don't want you to put the ball in his hands and try to make a decision here. Spot up. I'm going to get you the ball and you're going to shoot, right? Or like you're going to cut and you're going to finish, which he's not much of a cutter and finisher. He's a 2-level scorer. It's mid-range and from deep, it's not inside at all. But if you can just sort of exist in that space where you're getting set up by other people and we just need you here for your floor spacing and floor spacing alone, if that's something that the starters need desperately, I think that option exists. I don't expect the Raptors to start off with that. We already saw RJ started in his first game here, but it's like, if spacing still becomes an issue, if this is a thing that we're talking about with the Raptors, I think they just have that like, okay, let's bring in our floor spacer off the bench. He's not going to be tasked with doing too much. You exist to space the floor for the Raptors, so just stand out there and hit your open shots when it's being passed to you. I think that is, especially because Gary Trent Jr. is also an unrestricted free agent this offseason. So is he going to stay on this team? Do you have plans for him? Or are you going to move him? Regardless, I think the Raptors need to figure something out with him. And he's been in this role where he sits and he starts and he's benched and it's all over the place. And he hasn't really had a set defined role that I think works for him. And I think maybe it is as your fifth starter who just comes in and spaces. And that it might not be. And maybe RJ can take that over. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like you said, it is going to take a while, but I think that and I hadn't even thought about this before you said, I think that might be the answer though. Well, that's if you keep Pascal, and we'll get to that. We'll get to him in a second, but that's if you keep Pascal, because I just don't know, especially long term, how that because Jakob Poeltl and I feel like he's also I don't really love the word underrated, but just the things he brings to the team, he does. All the thing, like every player doesn't, he's not going to give you 30 points. He's probably not going to give you 20, but he does all the little things correctly. Like even as small as, like I've mentioned, like with Immanuel Quickley with the floaters, now he has somebody who can actually really screen for him and screen well for him, and he has that space. Little things like that. So you can't, and obviously the defense protecting the basket, Jakob Poeltl, you have to keep him in there, so you can't have shooting from him. Pascal, you can't rely on shooting from him. Scotty's a lot better of a shooter now, obviously. But then you can't have basically just Immanuel Quickley running the offense and shooting the ball. And so that's a great idea.
I'm interested to see how fast they're going to play because in theory, their lineup of, if you throw Barrett out there along with Gary Trent and Quickley, that should be a more fast-paced lineup, especially whether you put Barnes or Siakam at the 4 and whoever's at the 5. Like they're traditionally not really a fast-paced team. I know they're a little bit faster now, it feels like, than when Nick Nurse was there. So it feels like that's something that maybe the coach wants to explore. Like I don't know. It just seems like he's trying to play to his player strengths. And if they're really going to start building this around Quickley, like it's literally in his name, not to be a punter or anything, but like that's his style of play. He likes to play fast, likes to play quick. So I do think I entirely agree. I think Gary Trent should be starting. And I am a huge Gary Trent Jr. fan, back to his Duke days, because I am the draft person. So I think he should be starting, and I think he should be your primary floor spacer. And, to the point, like that's what they need. Like at some point, you need some space for, if Scotty Barnes, whoever you decide is going to be and it should be Scotty, obviously, is going to be your guy going forward. You need to give him the most space to work with, point blank, period. And I feel like, with RJ there, it's not really going to exist. I was actually rummaging through some stats because I feel like, OG, like you guys said, is pretty freaking underrated. Even if that word is overused, not for him. I was looking at the team with him on. They're actually a plus 2.2 net rating. But as soon as he steps off the floor, they're -8. And how do you think, Imman, that is going to change now that there is no OG? Do you think they're going to, like, obviously I don't expect them to be -8 because they've added two pieces that are, obviously a lot better, especially getting rid of some, addition by subtraction. But
let's clarify.
No, but
we Precious Achiuwa, we don't hate you.
No.
I was about to say something that might be harsher just to answer that, because those are OG's numbers, and a large reason for that is he's not the starter who plays with the bench, right? What ends up happening is the vast majority of OG's minutes come with the starter players on. He's not being tasked to lead the Precious Achiuwa, Malachi Flynn teams, right? Who, let me tell you, Precious getting a lot of hate. No one has a bigger issue here than Precious Achiuwa. But Pascal and Scotty don't have those, because Scotty especially is tasked with running a lineup with 4 bench players, and Pascal has been tasked with running lineups with 4 and 3 bench players as well. OG Anunoby doesn't really, he's had that once or twice, but you're not, Darko, for all of Darko's faults, he's not really running OG plus bench out there. He's done it before, and it was disastrous. But Scotty plus bench and Pascal plus bench has sort of been more of a thing, or Pascal and Dennis plus bench. And I'm sorry, the Raptors bench has just been horrible, which is part of the reason why this trade worked so well, is because, yes, technically on paper it's a 3 for 2, but in reality it's a 2 for 1. You're getting OG for Immanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett. You're getting 2 rotation players that you can throw out there, and even the Raptors broadcast, they're not you hear them saying it. They're like, well, they got 2 guys that they can play. And it's like, you guys know that we technically gave up 3 guys. But, Malachi and Precious, both of them are going to be restricted free agents this summer. And there's no reason to believe that the Raptors should have committed any money to them. Malachi, it sucks, but he's just really small. And maybe Tom Thibodeau can figure something out with that. He's done it before with small guards. I think that he's been the small guard whisperer. I don't know another coach who has played with so many small guards and gotten so much out of them. So I don't know, maybe this is DJ Augustine or John Lucas III is who I was tweeting about this morning, because those are Raptor guys who did not work out here, but worked out under Tibbs. So yeah, that's Malachi, who's just, it has not worked out for him here. Nick Nurse just refused to play him, and Darko has played him, and it's not been great for the Toronto Raptors. And then Precious Achiuwa, I don't need to really get into him. I think Heat fans are very familiar with the Precious Achiuwa experience. I love him, but I love him because of those split second moments where you're like, he's so great, and then the rest of the time I just pretend I don't see. 90% of the time I'm just closing my eyes. I never saw it. Precious, I never saw you mess up one time.
He's what I call hot flashes. Sometimes you get him, you're like, woo, that motherfucker good. And then other times you're like, oh, I can't look at the screen. What is he doing? Where is he guarding? I don't think he should be a 5. Knicks fans, if that is your answer to the backup center spot, please.
Rest in peace.
Please prepare yourself.
He did fine for the Raptors for a bit. He prior to them getting Pirtle, they used a lot of Precious at the 5. I will say, I think, again, Precious is another one of those guys where when he's playing with a lot of bench guys, and Tom Thibodeau really does run those starters bench lineups, there's not a lot of staggering of that. And let me tell you something, put it 4 starters when you play Precious Achiuwa. It's just going to make him a little bit better, because it's going to be less decisions from Precious, which is always the best.
Yeah, it's the finishing too. I don't understand it.
Yeah, it's a lot. The Precious experience is a lot, but I've never seen you do anything bad. I've only seen you do perfect things, Precious Achiuwa. Thank you.
So going from the negative. I don't want to be too hard on Precious or too hard on anybody in general. I got to get back to the – I'm going to keep calling him a South Florida native. If you playing like that, we going to claim you. Scotty Barnes, man. Like, he's coming off a down season, and this is why Imman, you've probably seen – I don't want someone to pay attention to me like that, but I've grown out of a lot of things, and one of the things – the main thing I really stopped doing was, like, being hard on players for certain parts of their careers, whether it's a bad game, a bad week, a bad month, or a bad season. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say Scotty Barnes was bad last season, but he didn't exactly meet expectations. Mm-hmm. And this year, and it's kind of ironic coming from me as somebody who decided wholeheartedly after 20 years, I'm not voting for the All-Star game because it takes more effort to do that than what they give in the game. But Scotty deserves to be there. So I'm going to give you the floor on Scotty Barnes.
Yeah, Scotty's phenomenal. It's so crazy. People were like, he's like, what has he done? And it's like, it's his second year, guys. He's 21. Let's all calm down, which is also how I feel about RJ Barrett, who's also only 23 years old. He's still also incredibly young. But Scotty Barnes has just been phenomenal for the Raptors. He has done absolutely everything for them. I don't think people realize just how versatile he's been for the team. I talked about him just getting the sort of starting point guard role right before they traded for Immanuel Quickley. They finally were like, all right, Dennis, you're going to go to the bench, and Scotty, you're going to be the point guard. He's also, when they can't play Jakob Poeltl to close games or even for just stretches in the games, he's been their starting five or like their backup five. Like, he's been their five and he's been their one and he's also their three and everything. Like, he just goes out there and whatever role you put Scotty in, he seems to be excelling in. I talked about his 3-point shooting, that it's also taken a major step up, which is part of the reason the Raptors look semi-decent with him out there at any point, is because like just the leaps that he's taken. He has been this team's closer also. Like, he's just done everything for this team. He's been everywhere. He's also improved defensively for this team. Like, this is, I was talking about like Scotty needs to take that next leap. And last year was conversation of like, who knows if Scotty takes that next leap and what that looks like or when it happens. And it's happened. Like, we've seen it and we've seen it consistently. We're 3 months into the season right now. He's taken that next leap and he looks like that guy. And I mentioned he's been doing it on all positions. Like, he's been their five and their one. He'll play both in the same game. And, be their rim protector, be their playmaker, be their only floor spacer really on the floor. So he talked about OG shooting, but one thing about OG shooting is it's really only happened in the corners this season. You have not seen, and you can't really just space in the corners. To be a true floor spacer, you're spacing the floor vertically. You've got everything. And OG's really struggled outside of the corners this year. It's not traditionally what OG does. OG is a good 3-point shooter. He's also not been the sort of high volume guy. That's been Scotty Barnes, which is not something that I think anyone, even the biggest Scotty optimist, would have said heading into this season, was that he was going to be the team's floor spacer and is just going to be doing it from all across, but he has been. But outside of just the shooting, he does everything for this team. His playmaking is taking another step. His dribble is taking another step. His defense is taking another step. Just absolutely everything that he's been doing has been spectacular. And it's why the Raptors wanted, I know a lot of people talk about like the trades. I know I'm going on a bit of a rant, but a lot of people talk about the trades that they should have made last season for picks and things like that. A large thing that Masai Ujiri has always done is he hates the idea of bottoming out. He hates the idea of like multi-year tanks or just getting picks. Like, that's just not been his. He's been at the helm of like 3 different rebuilds, and each time, including this one now, he's wanted players back, right? Like, when he traded away Carmelo Anthony, it wasn't to get a bunch of picks back from the Knicks. Yeah, he did get one. It turned out to be Jamal Murray, kind of nice. But it was to get guys like Danilo Gallinari and Danilo Gallinari and Wilson Chandler and everybody else that they had on those teams. When the Raptors were blowing it up in his first year here and he traded away Rudy Gay, he didn't get back any picks. Instead, he got Chuck Hayes and John Salmons and Patrick Patterson and players who could play right away. And all of the reports coming from Toronto and from the Raptors side was that the Raptors wanted young players. They wanted 2 young promising players in a first. They ended up getting 2 young promising players and Detroit's second round pick, which is going to be the 31st pick, which sure, might as well be a late first rounder at that point, right? So they kind of got around what they were reportedly wanting last year because, yes, you could get 3 picks and that sounds nice, especially to basketball fans who are like, yeah, take that. That's amazing. But those are going to be heavily protected picks. By the time you draft them, by the time you develop them, which as Raptor fans are seeing, not everybody can be Jaime in their first season, their Grady Dick is now, I think doing conditioning training and going to the G League and is not really fitting into this Raptors team despite being a higher lottery pick. It takes a while to develop rookies, and Scottie Barnes is ready to win right now. So having 3 additional rookies puts you in the Detroit Pistons category where everyone's 22 years old and that team is not ready to win at all. So that's why they wanted proven players who can play. It's probably what they're going to want for Pascal Siakam as well. I guess we'll get into that in just a bit, but that's why this trade made sense for the Toronto Raptors, and why a deal's done there.
Yeah, and so real quick, because I don't see a real reason for it, but I've seen a lot of reports. Why would they trade Pascal Siakam? Because I don't know why they would ever do it.
I'm with you. I really don't want them to trade Pascal. To me, the whole idea was everyone talks about timelines and windows, which I don't understand. I say, I don't want a team full of 22-year-olds. I'm not casting a high school TV show. I'm building a basketball team. No one said when Tim Duncan was drafted, well, if he's not on David Robinson's timeline, guess we should trade away David Robinson. That doesn't make any sense, right? What ended up happening, they win a championship with both of them, and then you've got Tim Duncan for the future. To me, timelines are more about, are players ready to win? Bam Adebayo is younger than Jimmy Butler, but they're on the same timeline because they're both ready to win right now. But Bam can carry the torch when Jimmy's done playing. So the idea that you need people on separate or same, Pascal Siakam wasn't on Kyle Lowry's timeline. They won a championship together because they were both ready to win at the same time. And to me, that was always the question between Scottie Barnes and Pascal Siakam is Scottie Barnes going to be ready to win when you have Pascal Siakam? And by the looks of it right now, Scottie Barnes is ready to win right now. Pascal Siakam is ready to win right now. I don't see why they don't work together. I think that that's always flawed as well. You can have 2 people that can create their own shot and play make a little bit. There's not a redundancy in their skill set at all. Mm-hmm. They just are 2 things that every basketball team needs multiple of. So I'm not of the belief that they need to trade Pascal Siakam either. But I also if there's no extension talks and nothing happening there, then trade him and see what that goes. I don't know why the Raptors want to trade him. I don't quite get it, but they don't seem to want to extend him either. So
yeah, I feel like the money's always the difficult situation. It's I do think Quickley's due for a contract extension here soon as well. So it's there's only so many max spots you can have, and that's the whole back salary stuff with basketball, the boring talk, as I like to call it. But it's some of the reasons some of these players even get dealt to begin with. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do decide to do, if they, because like you stated, they like to get their players as opposed to picks. And if Siakam does get moved, it'd be interesting who they would bring back. It'd be, how that person affects their future or their build or wherever they're planning to go. And, the bench isn't resolved. It's better, but it's not completely done. So it'd be interesting to see if that's also a key point. So my question to you is, do you think them trading Siakam ultimately makes them better? Or do you just think it's going to be a for sure no?
It depends on what they trade him for. It depends on what they get back. It looking around something, and I had this thread about it, and I don't know if I want to write a piece on it, but the whole idea is that what Masai Ujiri did with Carmelo Anthony when he was the general manager of the Denver Nuggets was Carmelo was also an expiring contract, and he traded him at the deadline. And what he did was he created everyone knew Melo wanted to be in New York. That was the only place he wanted to go. And everyone knew that New York had the money in the offseason to get him. They didn't need to make that trade. It was no need for a trade there. But what Masai Ujiri was able to do, and I think what smart GMs do, is they create this feeling of scarcity and they create competition. And so what Masai Ujiri did was pitted the Brooklyn Nets with the New York Knicks. And now New York felt the threat of Brooklyn and said, holy crap, we got to trade for him. And so they put absolutely everything on the table. And then the Nuggets finished with a better record than the Knicks that season. So all that to say is like, no, the Raptors are never going to get a Pascal Siakam trade package that rivals Carmelo. It could be like, there's no scenario where that will ever happen. But what the Raptors are seemingly doing, and you're seeing reports like this come out, is pitting these Atlanta Hawks, Dallas Mavericks, Indiana Pacers, Sacramento Kings, teams against each other to say, hey, like all 4 of you guys want him. Getting his bird rights is going to be really important. Can we get something back from you? And Siakam's agent's making that difficult because every day there's another report about Siakam not signing an extension with the team that he goes to. But yeah, he's not going to sign an extension, but you will have his bird rights to sign him, and no players turning down more money. Like, that's such a rare thing to happen. So teams, like, that's what it seems like Masai Ujiri is doing. That's what it seems like the Raptors are doing. I don't know what trade package is out there that's like super duper enticing, but what I imagine the Raptors are doing, and this is not based on any information that I've heard, is like, if they can find a deal for Siakam, he's gone. But if not, they're totally fine extending him and keeping him and trying to see what happens there. Masai's done that before. He signed Nene to a super long contract and then traded him as soon as he could. And I don't see any reason why the Raptors wouldn't do something like that with Pascal Siakam. But I think they should keep him. I think the Raptors are a better team with Pascal. If anyone's caught any of the games in the last weeks or so, he's been just the brightest spot for the team.
This is crazy to me, and Imman, you'll understand this in a second because the topic we're closing with. So, and first of all, because we mentioned RJ Barrett being ranked number 1 in his high school class, he was also, if I'm not mistaken, the first unanimous player of the year since LeBron James in high school. Oof. And so, and this is why it's crazy, Imman, because you have no idea what this topic is, but you mentioned Tim Duncan, you mentioned Jaime, you mentioned players' timelines not really matching or whatever it is. But the thing I wanted to get into, because I was watching RJ Barrett and looking at his stint with the Knicks, is I'm kind of curious about how I feel like the pendulum has swung too far with teams drafting young players. And Lou, you're the college guy, and I know you have a different stance on this than I do. So I'm going to go to you first, and then I'll kind of give my thing, and then I'll see what Imman thinks.
Yeah, like just in general, teams drafting older players, I feel like that's been something that I feel like people are always chasing the lottery ticket. They're always chasing the upside because that truly could be franchise altering. The problem is not many people hit the ticket. Not many people get Giannis. Not many people get a Damian Lillard, at the end of Steph Curry. Like it doesn't really happen. Like most of the times, people get OG Anunoby's with the 20th pick. These later players who are more veteran players end up going later in the draft, and then they end up going to these situations which are, seemingly better, obviously just due to simple record implications and stuff like that. And they're given these roles technically in these better franchises and more stable spots, but it's truly interesting, just the sheer amount of like 19-year-olds who always get drafted in the top 5. And like, as soon as you see somebody who's like this year, the SAR twins, they went like 4 and 5, but everybody was like, oh, they're 21 almost. Like they're too old to go top 5. I was like, man, if you just turn on, you watch the tape, man, it doesn't matter their age. Like you take him because he can play the game. You take players who can play the game. Sometimes that gets overlooked with the older guys just because they can play the game. But the thought of like, I'm not going to trash no names here, but like somebody like Bilal Coulibaly going as high as he did off of the tape that I saw, I was baffled by it. But it's just due to the fact because he's 19 years old and you're chasing what he could be. And I see that vision, but you're over here past, I'm not here to flame nobody, but Grady Dick, man, oh man, I did not like him, but it was what it was. And you guys are chasing the upside. You guys were trying to get your version of Duncan Robinson, but
whoa, what is it? What is all this?
No, man, it's just for real. It's like teams are always chasing, like it feels like teams are always chasing the upside in a player, and they feel like they can develop them, but not everybody is. Toronto is very good at developing players. Not everybody is in Miami. The Knicks have done a good job recently as well. Like, not every team, Sacramento, not every team is just good at developing players, but they'd rather take a shot on an 18-year-old than a 22-year-old who played 3 years of college. And
you know what? We actually are kind of on the same page with this, because what I noticed is there's a lot of high school phenoms in the G League and overseas right now. I think because before, even a college freshman, before the high school rule, you couldn't come out of high school. Even freshmen, they weren't ready, and they just go back to college until they were. And now it's like everybody's coming out every year. Like you said, the team is just looking for upside, even when they don't necessarily need it. I feel like you can afford that when you're a bad team. Like, for example, Cam Whitmore is in and out of the G League right now, and he did fall in the draft, but it's like you just can't always gamble on those guys because they're athletic or because they have this or have that at this age. And we see it so Lou, me and you, we see both sides of it right now with the Miami Heat, where you got Jaime Jaquez Jr. He comes out as a 4-year player, and he's been the Heat's best player at some points in this season, if we're being completely honest. And on the other hand, you have Nikola Jovic, who has, and we love him, but he's kind of done nothing this whole time. And he's in a contract year right now. Team option, maybe they'll pick him up. But for me, it's just kind of not worth it for good teams to do that, because you don't have the time to develop these guys. And not only do you kind of mess up their careers in a sense, but you're wasting their rookie contract. Because if they do become who you want them to become in 2 or 3 years, they could just go somewhere else now. So why not, if you're the Celtics or the Heat or the Bucks or whatever, just draft somebody who's been in college for a while, who's ready to play?
Yeah, I agree. And that's been the Raptors' philosophy for a long time. Now, granted, they were a good team when they were doing this. And since they've been a bad team, they've been drafting younger guys because, to your point, when you have a lottery pick, it tends to be the younger guys that you go because everyone's looking for high upside with those picks. But Pascal Siakam, 27th pick, 4-year player. Fred VanVleet, 4-year guy before coming into the league. He was undrafted. The Raptors, for the longest time, were just drafting 4-year players. I think Norman Powell had been there for a while because he's 93 born, came in 2016, or 2015, so he would have been in college for a while. I don't know how much because I don't watch any college, sorry, but definitely a lot of 4-year players for the Raptors and who they were taking. Until recently, where they have now lottery picks into the last 3 years, and those guys were one and dones. And you're seeing with Scotty came in an immediate impact, and then you're seeing with Grady Dick, well, now you have to worry about his conditioning because he's not up to speed in the NBA level, and that's going to take a while. And you're seeing him go down to the G League, and hopefully he can come back. And maybe there's something the Raptors did see in him where you're starting to see that in, if not the second half of the season, the next year. But yeah, I've always been pro 4-year players if they're better, and that's something that the Raptors had done. And also, just transferring that into the NBA lens, I've always been so annoyed when people talk about like, oh, they're 30 or they're 29 or all this other stuff, because I don't think age matters. For example, the Raptors have Pascal Siakam, who's 29, and they have Otto Porter, who is 30. Yes, there's only a year between them two, but like it might as well be 20 years. Like Otto Porter, love him, think he's so important to this Raptors team. If he gets on the court and plays, is often really injured and can only play in sort of short bursts and things like that. Whereas Pascal Siakam plays 40 minutes a night and is running all around and is super athletic and never tires. And so this idea that like, oh, he's 29, age is creeping up on him. Who knows how long he'll play for? I mean, Kyle Lowry, we've been talking about him being too old since I think when the Raptors in 2016, people were like, oh, he's the end of his career. He's aging out here. He's in his 30s. And the guy's still playing basketball at 37, right? So like, not very well, aging. You definitely see the age now, but at least, in the 30s when people were saying that, I don't think people saw a few more all-star seasons in his career and a championship and all the other stuff that he was able to do. I think age and just the way that we frame it doesn't matter as much, especially when we're talking about different style of players. And it starts from when they were in college, but it continues in their NBA career as well.
ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to episode 8 of Playoff Foul. We want to give a special thank you to our guest today once again, Imman. Anything else you want to say? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm working on a piece that's coming out on Prose Claws for this trade and just like why the Raptors did it for people who are still kind of confused on why the Raptors did it and why it made sense, and why they waited for this year and how that's not a bad thing.
And where can they find you?
Imman, IMMAN_Adan, ADAN on Twitter, but like good luck.
Me personally, at KennySpenceNBA on Twitter. I don't use anything else. Lou?
At SaucyTakez, all together with the Z at the end, because I guess it's hip. The other one.
Music throughout is done by my brother, Devin Spence. You can find him on Instagram or TikTok, Black Glow Music. And that being said, we'll see y'all next time.